K.W. Krieger presents The Obscura Dossier, Episode 16, Good Fortune. Statement of Gregory Paige regarding a series of fatal incidents throughout his life and the presence of certain figures connected to these events. Statement taken February 9th, 2006. Statement begins. I don't know where else to begin, except to admit something most people don't believe. I am not lucky. I've been called it my whole life, the lucky boy, the miracle survivor, the one fate smiled on. But that's not what this is. There is nothing kind or fortunate in what has happened to me. Every time I survive, someone else dies. That is not luck. That is a curse. It started early. When I was 8 years old, my parents died in a fire that gutted our home in Leeds. I should have been with them, should have died with them, but I wasn't. I was standing in the garden, staring up at the window of my bedroom, watching the flames. I can't remember leaving the house. I can't remember hearing the alarm or smelling smoke. One moment I was in bed, the next I was outside in the cold night air, barefoot on the grass, watching the orange light devour everything. The fire service said it spread fast, blamed faulty wiring. My parents never made it out. The police kept asking how I had. I had no answer for them, and I still don't. It didn't end there. A few years later in school, we were driving back from a field trip when the bus veered off the road. They said the driver had a seizure. The vehicle flipped twice before sliding into a ditch, where the windows were shattered and the steel bent like paper. The children screamed, bled. 2 classmates died. The rest had concussions, broken bones, cuts, bruises. I had been at the very front, where the impact was worse, strapped into a seat with a broken belt that should have flung me clear. Instead, it held me firm, as though by invisible hands. And when the wreckage was pulled apart, I climbed out without a scratch. Teachers called it a miracle. Even as a child, I knew better. As I grew older, the pattern only sharpened. On a construction site in 1999, I'd been tasked with hauling materials up a scaffolding tower. I remember pausing midway, one boot on the next rung, my body heavy with that sense of fatigue you only get on those long work days. And for no reason that I can explain, I stepped back down instead of climbing up. I was 3 steps from the ground when the entire structure collapsed. It fell inwards, steel and timber folding like a trap, snapping shut. The sound was deafening, a roar of metal grinding and men screaming. I stood frozen, dust settling around me, while the rest of the crew lay pinned or crushed. 3 dead, 4 more injured. Me, untouched. Another time, I was taking a late train southbound. It was quiet, only a handful of passengers scattered across the carriages. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke to the sound of screeching metal and twisting rails. The train bucked like a wild animal, carriages lifted and toppled and tore free of the tracks. The windows burst into fragments and the lights went black. I braced myself for the impact, but it never came. My carriage, the last one, rattled and shook, but stayed upright. When the chaos ended, I stepped down onto the gravel and looked back. The rest of the train lay broken, overturned like a child's toy. I can still hear the cries of the wounded and the silence of the dead between them. Over time, I began keeping count. A futile exercise, but the number gnawed at me. 37. 37 souls lost in accidents where I remained unscathed. 37 people close enough to touch, to speak, to know my name. It became impossible to ignore. Impossible to pretend this was chance. The world moves on quickly after disaster. Survivors are praised, pitied, and interviewed, and then forgotten. But I could not forget. I could not ignore the eyes of grieving families staring at me as though I had stolen something precious from them. And maybe I had. I thought for a while that maybe distance would save people, that if I isolated myself, I could keep the deaths at bay. I left my job, packed my things, and moved to a small town in the north where no one knew me. I told myself I would keep to myself. No attachments, no friends, not even polite small talk with strangers. But it didn't work. The neighbor across the landing invited me in for tea one evening. She was a kind woman, older, with that habit of baking too much and pressing food on anyone within reach. I almost said yes. At the last moment, I refused. No reason, just a tightening in my chest that told me not to go. She laughed it off and told me next time. There was no next time. That same night, a gas leak tore through her flat. They found her body under the kitchen table, burned so badly she could not be recognized. I smelled the smoke, of course, and stumbled out into the street with the other tenants. But my flat was untouched. I remember staring at the blackened doorway of hers, thinking if I had gone in, she might have lived. The fire would have claimed me instead. After that, I moved again. A new city, a new flat, a new resolve to cut ties. But it followed. It always follows. The landlord of my second place was a tall, fit man in his early 40s. He prided himself on still doing the maintenance, all by himself. One evening I heard him on the stairs above me, whistling with a toolbox in his hand, and then a few seconds later, a crash. I ran up to find him sprawled at the floor of the steps, neck bent at a wrong angle, eyes glassy, dead instantly. The police called it a tragic fall. His wife wept as she cleared his things from the hallway, and I stood in silence, unable to meet her gaze. I don't know if you can understand the kind of dread that sets in. The knowledge that anyone near me is already living on borrowed time. It turns every handshake into a death sentence, every conversation into a countdown. I began to believe I was contagious. Not with disease, but with inevitability. And so I withdrew. I stopped speaking, stopped leaving the flat, ate canned food, shunned neighbors, lived like a ghost, and still, it came. Even when I spoke to no one, the pattern continued. A delivery driver who brought my parcels was struck by a car a week later. A postman who stopped to chat in the corridor collapsed of a sudden aneurysm. Always close enough to brush my life, and always gone soon after. I can't escape it, I can't outwait it, it follows me like a shadow. And for a long time I thought it was only me and whatever shadows keep me alive at the cost of others. But lately I've come to realize I'm not the only one aware of it. There are people too. The first time was outside my building, late at night. I'd gone down for a cigarette, standing by the bins when I noticed someone across the road. They stood beneath the street lamp, still as a statue, facing my building. A trick of the light kept their features hidden, but I could feel their eyes on me. I waited for them to move on, but they didn't. When I finally retreated inside and looked again from my window, the street was empty. A few weeks later, I found something pressed into the wood of my front door. At first, I thought it was vandalism, some kid mucking about, but it was too deliberate. Shards of black glass fixed there with some kind of resin, arranged into the shape of an eye. Its surface caught the whole light strangely, as though it absorbed rather than reflected it. I tore the pieces out with pliers, but I kept one. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. A need to know. Well, the next day I took it to a glazier's shop and the man behind the counter turned it over in his hands, frowning. He said that it wasn't glass at all. Obsidian, he told me. Volcanic glass. Old as the earth itself. Brittle, yet sharp. Not something you'd find lying around Sheffield. Not without effort. When I asked if it meant anything, he only shrugged and said, "Some people like the look of it. Black glass, mysterious, and all of that. Nothing unusual." But he was wrong. There was nothing ordinary about finding it hammered into my door, staring back at me. It didn't end there. At a train station, an old woman brushed past me. She pressed something into my hand and kept walking. I looked down, and it was another piece of obsidian, jagged and cold. I tried to drop it, but my fingers resisted as if it wanted to stay with me. When I finally let go, it clattered onto the platform. I bent to look for her, but she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Since then I see them more often. A man watching from across the street, a woman who rode the same bus as me 3 days running, eyes fixed on me the whole way. Reflections that linger too long in shop windows. Even in dreams, they gather at the foot of my bed, a ring of silent shadows waiting. I don't know what they want, not yet. But I know this. They don't want me dead. It hasn't stopped. The accidents still come, and with them, the watchers. Last winter, a lorry jackknifed on the motorway ahead of me. I remember the screech of tires, the sound of metal rending, the car in front of me spinning sideways. I should have been caught in it. Should have been crushed like the others, but somehow my car slid between the wreckage untouched and rolled to a stop on the hard shoulder. When I stumbled out shaking, I saw someone on the far embankment. A man in a long coat, standing utterly still, watching the carnage, watching me. The ambulance came, the police, By the time I looked again, he was gone. Another time I slipped on the stairs at a train station. My foot went out from under me, my body tilting back towards the long drop. I felt the air rush past me, felt the weightlessness of the fall, and then somehow I landed on my feet at the bottom, knees buckling, but unbroken. I was gasping and laughing in disbelief when I saw her, a woman in black, standing at the top of the staircase where I'd fallen. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. She just stared down at me until the crowd came and swallowed her up. 2 months ago, I woke to the sound of crackling. At first, I thought it was rain against the window, but when I opened my eyes, the room was glowing red. Smoke thickened the air, stinging my throat and filling my lungs. The fire had already consumed the hallway. Flames licked the doorframe, rolled across the ceiling, and turned the wallpaper into ash before my eyes. My sheets were smoldering, my clothes on the chair already alight. I should have been dead. No one wakes in the middle of an inferno and walks out alive. I don't even remember thinking, only moving. I stumbled through the heat barefoot on a carpet that melted beneath me and pulled the door open. Fire roared in like a living thing. The corridor was an oven. Wallpaper blistered and peeled, light bulbs bursting in their sockets. The air was thick with the smell of burning hair and plastic. I forced myself forward, coughing every breath a knife in my lungs. Halfway down the hall, I heard screaming. The neighbor's boy, Daniel, barely 7, stood trapped at his bedroom door. His small hands clawed at the handle, his face streaked with tears. The fire was already there before me, crawling up the walls and wrapping around him like a shroud. I swear to you, I saw it happen. His skin blackened as the fire took him, blistering, splitting, curling away from the muscle beneath. His eyes went wide, his mouth still open in that terrible scream, until his voice broke and he crumpled to the floor. I should have gone to him. I should have tried, but my body moved without me, carrying me past him, carrying me out through the stairwell and into the cold night air. I burst into the street, gasping, shaking, watching the whole building blaze like a pyre. The firemen pulled bodies out one by one, laying them under sheets. The boy, his parents, others I had passed on the stairs every morning, all gone. And me? Not a single burn. Not a mark. My clothes singed, my hair reeking of smoke, but my skin untouched. And across the street, at the edge of the firelight, someone was watching. A tall figure, motionless. While others screamed and wept, they stood there calm and patient, as if this was what they had come for. And their eyes never left me. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I've tried running, I've tried hiding, but it's never enough. No matter where I go, death follows. Not for me, but for anyone unlucky enough to be near. That's why I've come here, to give this account. I needed someone to have it written down in case I disappear for good. If nothing else, let there be a record, proof that it happened, proof that I was here. I can't bear to watch another person die in my place, so I've made a choice. Tomorrow I'll board a freighter heading west. When we're far enough into the Atlantic, I'll take a lifeboat and set out alone. There are islands out there, bare rocks, no people, no one to lose but me. If I survive, then at least I won't bring death to anyone else. If I don't, then perhaps that will finally be the end of it. I don't know who the Watchers are or why they follow me. I don't know what they want, but I do know this. They are always there and always waiting. And I believe they are more than just witnesses. They are orchestrators, shepherds of death and chaos, guiding it, feeding it, shaping it into something deliberate. And somehow I am part of it. Take this as a warning. Something is out there, and it is watching. Statement ends. I have checked incident reports for the events Mr. Paige describes. There was indeed a house fire in Leeds in 1954 that claimed 2 lives, though the official record lists no surviving child. The school bus crash in 61 is also accurate, as is the 1999 scaffolding collapse. No mention of a Gregory Paige appears in any official list of survivors. As for the most recent fire, the one that destroyed a tenement block in Sheffield 2 months ago, the report does confirm 6 casualties, including a child. However, there is no reference to a 7th tenant escaping unharmed. It is also worth noting the obvious inconsistency of dates. If Mr. Paige truly witnessed the 1954 house fire as a child, his age would now place him well into his 60s at least. The man who delivered this statement appeared by every outward measure no older than his mid-40s. This discrepancy remains unexplained. Regarding the Watchers, our files contain very little. A handful of scattered references to a group obsessed with death, occasionally linked to obsidian iconography, but nothing concrete. Their supposed name is inconsistent, varying across accounts, and any surviving documentation is fragmentary at best. If they are real, they are careful enough to avoid the kind of attention that would leave a trace outside of a testimony like this. No further leads present themselves at this time. End recording. The Obscure Dossier is a podcast created by K.W. Krieger, licensed under a Creative Commons Non-Attribution Non-Share-alike 4.0 international license. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow us on Reddit at The Obscure Dossier, like us on Facebook, and as always, thanks for listening.